The planet was called New Eden, and it deserved every letter of that name. It sat in the outer rim of the Kepler expanse, a quiet stretch of explored space that the Terran Colonial Authority had officially charted 18 years ago. The planet was warm, green, and alive in ways that made even seasoned colonists stop walking just to stare at it. The grass grew in wide, rolling fields that shimmered silver when the twin moons rose at night. The rivers ran clear and cold, fed by glaciers that sat on the northern mountains like old sleeping giants. The air smelled like pine and rain and something else, something that nobody had ever been able to name, something that just made you breathe a little deeper every single time. 43,000 people called New Eden home. They were not soldiers. They were not politicians or generals or diplomats. They were farmers, teachers, doctors, engineers, mechanics, artists, and children. They were families who had packed everything they owned into colony ships and made a one-way journey to a new world because they believed in something, a quieter life, a bigger sky, a future they could build with their own hands. Marcus Webb was one of them. He was 38 years old, built wide and solid like a man who had spent his entire adult life doing physical work, which he had. His hair was brown going gray at the temples, and his hands were permanently rough from the soil of New Eden's northern fields, where he ran a crop farm that produced enough grain to feed 3 of the colony's 7 districts. He wasn't rich. He wasn't famous. He was just a man who woke up before sunrise every morning, drank bad coffee, and went to work in the fields while his daughter was still asleep. His daughter's name was Lily. She was 9 years old, small for her age, with her mother's dark eyes and her father's stubborn jaw. She collected rocks. Not just any rocks. She collected rocks from every different part of New Eden, and she kept them in a wooden box that she had painted herself in blue and green colors. She had labeled each rock in her careful, uneven handwriting: Northern Ridge, River Bend, Old Miller's Hill, the place where Dad cried when Mom left. That last one made Marcus smile every time he saw it, even though it also made his chest tight. His wife, Dana, had left 2 years ago, not because she stopped loving him, but because New Eden had stopped feeling like enough for her. She had gone back to Earth, back to the cities and the noise and the things she called real life. Marcus had let her go. He had stayed. Because for him, New Eden was not a compromise. It was the whole point. He and Lily lived in a 2-room house on the edge of the northern fields. It had a porch where they ate breakfast when the weather was good, which was most days. It had a wood stove that Lily had named Gerald. It had a wall covered in drawings that Lily had made, drawings of the fields, the mountains, the moons, and one large drawing right in the center that she called Our Family, which showed Marcus, herself, and a dog they did not own but that Lily had decided they were going to get eventually. Life was not dramatic. Life was not extraordinary. That was the whole point. On the morning of October 14th, in the colony's 18th year, Marcus was in the northern field doing his second row of the day when his communicator buzzed. He pulled it from his belt and looked at it, a message from the colony's central hub, District 1. That was unusual. The hub almost never sent direct messages to individual colonists. They sent general broadcasts about weather patterns or supply schedules or community events, but direct messages meant something specific was happening. He read it. All colonists, Emergency Protocol 7 activated. Please remain indoors and await further instruction. This is not a drill. Marcus read it twice. Emergency Protocol 7. He had to think for a moment to remember what that meant. He had sat through the mandatory orientation when he first arrived 18 years ago, and there had been a laminated card with a list of protocols. Protocol 1 was fire. Protocol 2 was flood. Protocol 3 was medical emergency. Protocol 4 was... He remembered. Protocol 7 was unidentified contact. He was already running back to the house before his mind fully caught up with his legs. Lily was at the kitchen table eating cereal when he came through the door. She looked up at him with her mother's dark eyes and read his face the way only a 9-year-old who had been raised by a single father could, completely and immediately.
"Dad," she said.
"What happened?" "Nothing yet," he said, which was technically true. "Come away from the window, okay? Come sit with me." "Dad," she said again, louder this time. "Lily." He sat down across from her and put his hands flat on the table. I need you to be brave for me right now.
Can you do that?
She put her spoon down. She looked at him with those dark eyes that missed nothing. Then she reached across the table and put her small hand over his big rough one and said, I'm always brave, Dad.
You know that. He did know that.
He squeezed her hand and pulled her close and held her, and outside the window of their two-room house, the sky above New Eden was completely clear and blue and quiet. It would be the last quiet morning New Eden ever had. The first ship appeared at 9:47 a.m. Colony Standard Time. It did not come from the direction of the transit lanes. It did not send a signal or a greeting or a request for communication. It simply appeared, dropping out of faster-than-light travel directly above the planet's atmosphere, which was already a violation of every known protocol in explored space, because ships were supposed to drop out of FTL at the edge of a system and travel in at conventional speeds. Dropping in directly above a planet was something nobody did, because nobody could do it without highly precise navigation. Nobody human anyway. The ship was enormous. That was the first thing the colony's satellite system registered: sheer, incomprehensible size. It was longer than New Eden's largest city. It was wider than the northern mountain range. It was flat on the bottom and curved on the top, like something had taken a continent and bent it slightly upward at the edges, and it was the color of deep space. Not black, exactly, but the color of the absence of color, a shade that seemed to absorb the light around it. The colony's emergency broadcast came alive. All colonists, unidentified vessel in high orbit. All colonists are advised to move to underground shelter immediately. Emergency Protocol 7 is in full effect. All colonists. It was cut off. Not by static. Not by a technical failure. It was cut off because the ship fired. The first beam hit District 1. Marcus was in his basement. He had grabbed Lily and his emergency kit and the wooden box of rocks because Lily had asked him to, and they were sitting on the floor of the basement with a battery-powered light between them when the ground shook. Not an earthquake shake. Not a tremor. Something deeper. Something that came from above rather than below. Something that hit the ground with such force that the walls of the basement cracked and dust fell from the ceiling in thick white curtains. Lily pressed herself against his side and said nothing. She was brave. She had told him she was always brave. He held her and said, "It's okay. It's okay. It's okay." He was lying. He had never lied to her before about anything that mattered. He was lying now. The ground shook again, and again, and again. Each shake was a district dying. District 1 went first. The Colonial Hub, 3,000 people, the administrative center, the communications array, the emergency response teams who had activated Protocol 7 and never got to see anyone respond to it. They were gone in 4 seconds. The beam that hit them was recorded on 17 different private cameras and later recovered from data archives. In those recordings, you could see the beam come down like a column of white fire from the ship above, not an explosion, not a missile, but a continuous stream of directed energy that hit the ground and simply erased everything it touched. Buildings dissolved. Streets disappeared. The earth itself fused into a flat, glass-smooth surface where a living city had been. District 2 went 12 seconds later. District 3 after that. The ship moved slowly, methodically, the way a person moves when they're doing a job they have done many times before. There was no hesitation. There was no warning shot. There was no message or demand or explanation of any kind. The aliens, whoever and whatever they were, had decided that New Eden was going to burn, and they were burning it. By 10:15 a.m. Colony Standard Time, 4 of New Eden's 7 districts were gone. 43,000 people had become 26,000. By 10:30 a.m., there were 9,000 left. By 10:47 a.m., exactly 1 hour after the first ship appeared, there were fewer than 2,000 survivors scattered across New Eden's northern wilderness, running through fields that were on fire, under a sky that was orange with heat and black with smoke, away from a planet that was being systematically and completely destroyed. Marcus Webb was one of the 2,000. Lily was beside him, running, her wooden box of rocks clutched against her chest, her small face streaked with ash and tears, her dark eyes wide and fixed straight ahead. He held her hand and ran. He did not know where he was running to. He only knew he was not going to stop. The northern wilderness of New Eden stretched for 400 kilometers between the colony's last standing district and the glacial mountains. In normal times, in the times that had existed 24 hours ago, nobody went into the northern wilderness without a full survival kit, a licensed guide, and a registered travel plan filed with the colonial authority. It was not a place built for people. It was full of deep ravines, dense silvergrass that grew taller than a man's head, predatory animals that were mostly harmless unless you were injured or small or slow. 2,000 traumatized, half-burned, grief-destroyed colonists were now inside it. Marcus moved with Lily for 3 hours before he found the others. They were gathered in a shallow ravine near the Kelvin River, a natural feature that had probably saved them because the ravine walls were deep enough to have shielded them from the heat of the burning districts and solid enough to have blocked the shockwaves. There were maybe 200 people in the ravine when Marcus arrived. He recognized some of them. Old Carter from District 4, who ran the grain mill. Sarah Okafor, who was one of the colony's 3 doctors. A man named Pete Diaz, who Marcus had played cards with exactly twice, but whose face he now felt an overwhelming relief to see. Sarah Okafor saw Marcus and Lily come down the ravine wall and immediately moved toward them. She was a small woman, dark-skinned, with her hair pulled back and a medical kit that she had managed to bring with her strapped across her back. She knelt down in front of Lily and looked at her with the calm, measured eyes of a doctor who had decided that being calm was the only useful thing she could be right now. "Are you hurt?" she asked Lily. Lily shook her head. "Are you scared?" Lily looked at her steadily. "Yes," she said. "But I'm being brave." Sarah Okafor looked up at Marcus over Lily's head, and something moved behind her eyes, something that was grief and admiration and the particular pain of seeing a child try to carry a weight that no child should have to carry. "She is," Marcus said quietly. "She really is." More survivors arrived through the afternoon and into the evening. By the time the twin moons rose, visible through a sky that was still hazy with smoke and the orange glow of distant fires, there were 612 people in and around the Kelvin River ravine. A man named Colonel James Harker found them just before midnight. He came in with 43 people, all of them wearing the gray uniform of the New Eden Colonial Militia, which was technically not a military force, but a security organization responsible for maintaining order in the colony. They had weapons, standard-issue pulse rifles, mostly, and they had communications equipment, and they had, more than anything, the quality that the ravine desperately needed right now, which was someone who knew what to do. Harker was 52 years old, former Terran Defense Force, retired 6 years ago, moved to New Eden because his daughter lived here. His daughter's name had been Rachel. District 3. She was gone. He had not spoken about this to anyone, and he would not speak about it for a long time, and when he finally did it would be in a very different context than a dark ravine by a river. But the grief was there in his face, not visible exactly, but present, the way a bone fracture is present even before it shows up on a scan. He stood in the center of the ravine and spoke clearly and without drama. "My name is James Harker. I was a colonel in the Terran Defense Force before I retired. I know what happened today. I know most of you are in shock. I know some of you have lost everyone you love. I'm not going to tell you that it's going to be okay, because I don't know that yet. What I'm going to tell you is what I know for certain." He paused. Let the silence settle. "We are alive. As long as we are alive, we can fight. As long as we can fight, this is not over. That's all I've got right now. But I think that's enough." Nobody cheered. Nobody clapped. But something in the ravine changed. Some invisible weight shifted slightly, and people straightened their backs a little, and the crying that had been constant and everywhere became, slowly, a little quieter. Not because the grief was gone, but because someone had given them a framework to put it in. Marcus sat against the ravine wall with Lily curled against his side, asleep finally, her wooden box clutched against her chest. He watched Harker move through the survivors, speaking to each group, listening, asking quiet questions, building a picture. The man was efficient, precise. You could see the military mind working underneath the civilian clothes. After a while, Harker crouched down next to Marcus. "What's your name?" he asked. "Marcus Webb. Northern Farms. District 6. What did you do before the colony?" "Engineer." Agricultural systems. Been a farmer since we landed. Harker nodded slowly. You know the Northern Territory? Pretty well. I've hunted up here. Run supply routes. Good. Harker looked at Lily. That your daughter?
Yeah.
How old? 9. Harker was quiet for a moment. Then, my daughter was 27. Marcus did not say I'm sorry because it felt inadequate, and he suspected Harker was not a man who found inadequate things useful. So instead he said, What do we do?
Harker looked at him.
We survive. We make contact. We wait for the Terran Armada. Do you think they're coming? Harker's jaw tightened.
They're coming, he said.
This kind of attack on a human colony, they're coming. The question is how fast. Marcus thought about the ship hanging above New Eden, that impossible, city-sized thing moving slowly across the sky, erasing everything below it with methodical precision. Will it be fast enough? He asked. Harker looked away toward the north, toward the mountains. I don't know, he said. But we're going to make sure there's something left for them to fight for. They found the emergency beacon on the second day. It was buried in a supply cache near the old Miller's Hill Trail, a cache that had been placed there as part of a colonial emergency plan that Marcus had honestly never thought would be used. Inside were medical supplies, water purification tablets, emergency rations, and a deep space emergency beacon designed to punch a signal through planetary interference and reach Terran relay stations up to 300 light-years away. Harker held the beacon in both hands and looked at it the way a man in a dark room looks at a match. This changes things, he said. Does it? A woman named Grace Teller asked. She was 40, red-haired, and had been the head of New Eden's school system until yesterday. Now she was one of the de facto leaders of the survivor group because she was organized and calm, and because everyone trusted her. They already know. They would have detected the attack. Detecting the attack and knowing survivors are alive are two different things, Harker said. This tells them we're here. It gives them coordinates. It gives them a reason to send something specific rather than just a patrol. And it tells the aliens where we are, Pete Diaz said from the back of the group.
Harker looked at him. Yes.
It does. The silence stretched. So we have to choose, Marcus said quietly. Signal for help and risk giving away our position. Or stay quiet and hope the Armada finds us anyway. Harker set the beacon down on a flat rock. He looked around the group, the tired, ash-stained, grieving faces of people who had survived something that should not have been survivable, looking at him for direction. I'm not going to make this decision for you, he said. This is all of our lives. We vote. They voted. The result was 481 to 131. They activated the beacon. The signal went out at 14:32 Colony Standard Time on October 15th, 28 hours and 45 minutes after the first alien beam hit District 1. It traveled at the speed of light, bouncing off relay stations, compressing itself through FTL communication arrays, screaming across 300 light-years of empty space toward the nearest Terran Defense Force listening post. It said, New Eden Colony. Attack by unidentified hostile force. Colony destroyed. Survivors present. Coordinates attached. This is not a drill.
Please respond.
The signal reached its destination 11 minutes later, not because light travels that fast, but because the FTL relay network had been built specifically to compress communication time. 11 minutes after activation, the message was sitting in the inbox of Admiral Elena Vasquez, commander of the Terran Armada's 3rd Fleet, currently stationed at Meridian Station, 260 light-years from New Eden. She read it once. She read it again. Then she stood up from her desk, walked to the door of her office, opened it, and said 4 words to her aide. Get me the fleet. Admiral Elena Vasquez had been in the Terran Defense Force for 31 years. She had seen combat 3 times, border skirmishes near the Vandal Expanse, a piracy suppression campaign in the outer colonies, and the Meridian incident 6 years ago, which was the closest humanity had come to losing a major military engagement since the Defense Force had been established. She had gray in her black hair and a scar along her jaw from a piece of shrapnel that had caught her during the Meridian incident when the bridge of her ship took a hit. She was 5 feet 4 inches tall and had a voice that carried across an entire flight deck without effort and could silence a room full of senior officers with a look. She was also, underneath all of that, a person from New Eden. Not originally. She had been born on Earth, raised in New Mexico, commissioned through the Terran Military Academy at 22. But her brother Thomas had moved to New Eden 12 years ago with his wife and their 2 boys. She had visited twice. She had eaten dinner at his kitchen table. She had played with her nephews in a field of silver grass under twin moons and thought, not for the first time, not for the last time, that maybe Thomas had made the smarter choice. Thomas lived in District 2. When the message from New Eden arrived on her desk, she read the coordinates, cross-referenced the district map that was stored in her personal files, and understood, with the cold mathematical clarity of a military mind, what had happened to District 2. She allowed herself 45 seconds. In those 45 seconds, she was not an admiral. She was a woman whose brother was gone, whose nephews were gone, who would never sit at that kitchen table again, who would never watch those boys run through silver grass under twin moons. She was grief, raw and absolute, and she let it exist fully for those 45 seconds because she understood that the alternative, pushing it down, pretending it wasn't there, was a slow poison that would eventually compromise her judgment when she needed it most. 45 seconds. Then she stood up. Then she went to the door. Then she said, "Get me the fleet," and Admiral Elena Vasquez went back to work. The Terran Armada's third fleet consisted of 47 ships. 8 of them were capital ships, the biggest, heaviest, most heavily armed vessels humanity had ever built. The flagship was the TDF Relentless, a kilometer-long behemoth that carried 2,000 crew, 48 long-range railgun batteries, 96 missile banks, a full fighter wing of 200 Valkyrie-class interceptors, and a primary weapon system called the Accelerated Mass Driver, which was capable of launching a tungsten projectile at a significant fraction of the speed of light and hitting a target with roughly the same energy as a small nuclear warhead. The other 39 ships were a mix of destroyers, frigates, cruisers, and support vessels, each one carrying human beings who had spent years training for exactly this kind of situation, and none of whom had ever actually faced it, because nothing had ever attacked a human colony before. In 31 years of space exploration, humanity had encountered exactly 2 other intelligent species. The Virati, who were insectoid and peaceful and communicated through a complex system of color patterns that linguists were still working to fully decode. And the Shun, who were aquatic, ancient, and largely indifferent to humanity's existence, occupying a different corner of the galaxy and having made contact exactly once, through a probe that simply said, in perfect mathematical language, "We know you are here. We have noted your existence. We wish you no harm." Both species had been a marvel. Neither had been a threat. This, whatever this was something different. Vasquez stood at the holographic display table in the center of the Relentless Bridge and looked at the data that her intelligence officers had compiled in the 4 hours since the beacon's signal arrived. The alien ship above New Eden was enormous. The satellite imagery recovered from the beacon's data package showed a vessel so large it registered as a geographic feature on the colony's atmospheric sensors. No known ship architecture matched it. No known propulsion signature matched the FTL drop pattern, direct atmospheric insertion, point-to-point, no transit lane usage. Whatever this species was, their technology was not comparable to humanity's. It was in a different category. "Commander Chen," she said. Lieutenant Commander Michelle Chen, her tactical officer, stepped forward. Chen was 30, sharp-minded, and had graduated top of her class at the academy. She was also the 3rd person Vasquez had told about New Eden when the beacon arrived, because she trusted Chen's analysis more than anyone else in the fleet. "Admiral." Threat assessment. Chen pulled up a holographic model of the alien vessel. Based on the energy readings in the beacon data package, the weapon system used on New Eden is a directed energy weapon, continuous beam, likely particle-based or plasma-based. Energy output per shot is approximately equivalent to 50 of our railgun batteries firing simultaneously. She paused. "A single shot, Admiral." The bridge was very quiet. "Shields?" Vasquez asked. "Unknown. We have no data on their defensive capabilities." "Speed?" FTL insertion directly above planetary atmosphere suggests their navigation capability significantly exceeds ours. Conventional speed within a system unknown. Crew complement unknown. Number of ships? At last sensor reading 1. Chun hesitated. But Admiral, if they sent one ship to destroy an entire colony, they may not feel they need more. Vasquez looked at the holographic alien ship for a long moment. Or, she said quietly, they sent one ship because they didn't know what they were starting. She called a senior officers' meeting in the briefing room at 1900 hours. 23 of her senior officers sat around the curved table, captains, commanders, tactical chiefs, engineering leads. All of them had read the data package. All of them knew about New Eden. All of them had the particular tight-jawed expression of military professionals who were keeping their emotions carefully controlled in a professional setting while those emotions quietly tore them apart from the inside. Vasquez stood at the front of the room and did not waste time. In 31 years, no intelligent species has attacked a human colony. As of 28 hours ago, that changed. New Eden colony was attacked without warning, without provocation, without communication of any kind. 41,000 human beings are confirmed dead. Approximately 2,000 survivors have been located via emergency beacon in the colony's northern wilderness. She let that sit for exactly 2 seconds. We are going to New Eden. We are going to recover those survivors. And we are going to make absolutely certain that whatever did this understands, in the clearest possible terms, what it means to attack humanity. A captain named Rodriguez, veteran, careful, not a man given to impulsive words, raised his hand. Admiral, the energy output data on their weapon system. I've read it. Then you know that even with all 47 ships. I know. Her voice did not waver. That's why we're not going in blind, Captain. We're going in smart. She activated the holographic table. Here is our approach. We drop out of FTL at the system's edge. We send Valkyrie wings first, fast, small, hard to target. We use them to probe the alien ship's response patterns and identify any defensive weaknesses. Simultaneously, capital ships advance in a staggered formation designed to draw fire across multiple vectors. We look for hull weaknesses, weapon charging cycles, any exploitable pattern in their attack sequence. And if there are no weaknesses? Another officer asked. Vasquez looked at her. There are always weaknesses. Everything that can be built can be broken. Our job is to find out how. She looked around the room. We don't know what they are. We don't know why they did this. We don't know if there are more of them coming. She paused. What we know is this. 41,000 people are dead. 2,000 people are still alive on a burning planet, waiting for us. And there is one ship, sitting above New Eden that thinks it can do whatever it wants to human beings without consequence. Her voice dropped lower, quieter, and somehow more forceful for it. We are going to teach them otherwise. Nobody in the room spoke. Then Captain Rodriguez nodded once. Yes, Admiral, he said. And one by one, the rest of the room followed. Back on New Eden, October 16th arrived cold. The northern wilderness had always been cooler than the colony's settled zones, but something had changed in the atmosphere. The fires from the destroyed districts were producing a layer of particulate matter that was blocking a portion of the sunlight reaching the surface. It wasn't full nuclear winter, but it was enough to drop temperatures noticeably and turn the sky a dull, hazy orange even in the middle of the day, and Lily, who had been wearing a light jacket when Marcus grabbed her from the house, was shivering by morning. Marcus gave her his coat. He didn't need it as much, he was bigger and he could keep himself warm by moving. He spent most of the daylight hours moving anyway, helping Harker and the other militia members organize the survivor group into functional units. 612 people had found the Kelvin River ravine. More were still coming in ones and twos and small groups, emerging from the Silvergrass Plains dirty and desperate and looking like people who had walked out of the end of the world, because they had. By October 16th, the number was 840. They were organizing themselves in the way that human beings always do when survival is the only option, not elegantly, not without conflict, but steadily. Harker had divided people into teams. Medical, led by Dr. Sarah Okafor. Food and water, security and watch, shelter construction, communications monitoring. Marcus was on 2 teams, supply runs and communications monitoring. The supply runs were dangerous. The alien ship was still up there. You could see it sometimes when the smoke cleared enough, a dark shape against the orange sky, enormous and still, like a bruise on the atmosphere. It wasn't firing anymore. Not continuously. But occasionally, when a survivor group moved too far into open ground or made too much noise or lit a fire in the wrong place, a beam would come down. Not at the survivors specifically, it seemed, but at areas of remaining colony infrastructure. The aliens were being thorough, systematic. They were finishing the job, which meant staying hidden was everything. No fires after dark, Harker had ordered on the first night. No unnecessary movement in open ground. No electronic signals except through the approved relay system. He had set up a communication chain, low-power short-range radios, the kind that wouldn't punch a signal high enough to reach orbit. It let the survivor group stay in contact without announcing themselves to whatever sensors the alien ship might be running. Marcus ran supplies 3 times on October 16th, moving through the ravine system to distribution points where other survivor groups were sheltering, carrying water and rations and medical supplies. It was grueling work. The ravine walls were steep in places, slippery with moisture, and the silver grass above them was thick enough to slow any movement to a crawl. But he knew the terrain, and he was strong, and he had the particular quality of focus that comes to a person when the alternative to focus is falling apart. He thought about Lily constantly, knowing exactly where she was, in the main ravine, with Dr. Okafor, helping distribute medical supplies to injured survivors with the calm, careful efficiency of a child who had decided that being useful was the bravest thing she could do, was the only thing that made the supply runs bearable. He knew where she was. She was safe. He could keep moving. On the second day, they found the children. There were 11 of them, ranging in age from 4 to 14, huddled in a collapsed supply shed near the edge of the northern farms. They had been there since the attack, alone, without any adults, surviving on rainwater collected in a broken trough and a box of emergency ration bars that someone had left in the shed. The oldest, a 14-year-old boy named Aaron Watts, had kept them together. He had organized the younger ones, rationed the food, kept them quiet and hidden when he heard things overhead, and had not slept more than 2 hours in 2 days. When Marcus and a militia member named Corporal Davis found them, Aaron Watts was sitting with his back against the shed wall, with a 4-year-old girl asleep in his arms and 3 younger children pressed against his sides. His face was gray with exhaustion and dried tears, and his eyes, when he looked up at Marcus, were the eyes of someone who had been carrying something much too heavy for much too long. "Are you from the colony?" Aaron asked. His voice was rough, barely above a whisper. "Yes," Marcus said. "We've got a camp. You're safe. All of you are safe." Aaron looked at him for a long moment. The 4-year-old in his arms stirred. The 3 smaller children shifted. Aaron Watts, 14 years old, who had kept 11 children alive through the end of the world, took a breath that sounded like it started somewhere very deep inside him. And then he started to cry. Not dramatically.
Not loudly.
Just quietly, with his eyes still open, tears cutting clean lines through the dirt on his face.
He was trying not to.
Marcus could see that. He was trying very hard not to. Marcus crossed the shed in 3 steps and crouched down in front of him and said, with as much gentleness as he had ever put into any words, "You did great, son.
You did exactly right.
I've got it from here." Aaron nodded. He kept crying quietly, and he let Marcus take the 4-year-old from his arms, and he stood up on legs that shook slightly with exhaustion. Then he wiped his face on his sleeve and straightened his back and looked at the 10 younger children around him with an expression that was already pulling itself back together. "Come on," he said to them. "We're going to a safe place." Marcus looked at this 14-year-old kid and thought about how sometimes humanity just made him want to weep. Not from sadness. From something else. The alien ship moved on October 17th. It had been stationary above the destroyed colony zones since the attack. On the morning of the 3rd day, it began moving, slowly, by its standards, but covering ground fast enough that the colony's surviving satellites tracked it shifting northward. toward the northern wilderness. Harker gathered the leadership team in an emergency meeting. "They know we're here," he said flatly. "The beacon. It was a risk we accepted. They must have detected the signal." "We don't know that," Grace Teller said. "They might just be continuing their sweep." "The timing matches," Harker said. "Beacon was activated 48 hours ago. They've been sitting still for 48 hours. Now they move north. The timing matches." The group looked at each other. Dr. Okafor spoke carefully. "If they're coming north, we have maybe 12 hours before they're above our position. Maybe less." "We disperse," Harker said. "Break into groups of 20. Spread out across the ravine system. Smaller targets are harder to find and harder to hit. And harder to supply and defend," Pete Diaz said. "Yes." Harker looked at him steadily. "It's a compromise. Everything is a compromise right now." Marcus was looking at the map, a physical paper map that Harker's team had found in the supply cache. The northern wilderness, the ravine system, the mountains beyond, the glaciers, he said. Everyone looked at him. The glacial caves in the northern mountains. He put his finger on the map. They're natural formations, deep, shielded by several hundred meters of ice and rock above them. If their sensors are anything like ours, rock and ice this thick would scatter the signal. They might not be able to locate us inside.
Harker looked at the map.
How far? 60 kilometers. On foot, through this terrain, 2 days. Maybe 3. People won't make it, someone said quietly. The injured. The children. More won't make it if that ship comes overhead, Marcus said. Harker stared at the map for a long moment. We start moving tonight, he said. Under cover of darkness. Groups of 20, as discussed. Staggered departure times to minimize the trail we leave. He looked up at Marcus. Webb, you're on point. You know this terrain. Can you get us to those caves? Marcus thought about Lily, who would be in his group. Lily with her wooden box of rocks, walking 60 kilometers through dark wilderness. He thought about what the alternative was. I can get you there, he said. They left at 2100 hours, when both moons were down and the sky was at its darkest. 840 survivors, moving through the northern wilderness in groups of 20, staggered 15 minutes apart, with Harker's militia members on the flanks and Marcus Webb at the front of the lead group, navigating by the paper map and his own 18 years of memory of this terrain. It was one of the hardest things Marcus had ever done. Not physically, though it was physically brutal, rough terrain in the dark, carrying supplies and children, helping the injured, moving as quietly as possible through brush that seemed determined to crackle and snap underfoot. What made it hardest was the silence that was required. No talking above a whisper. No lights. No noise. 840 people, including children, including injured, including people who were still in the raw, jagged early stages of grief, moving through complete darkness, in total silence, away from the thing that had destroyed everything they had. Lily walked beside Marcus with her hand in his and her wooden box under her other arm. She had tied it shut with a piece of cord so it wouldn't rattle. She had done this herself, without being told. She walked steadily, without complaint, matching his pace with her shorter legs in a way that made him aware, with a painful sharpness, that she was working much harder than he was just to keep up. Lily, he whispered after the first hour. Do you want me to carry the box? No, she whispered back. It must be heavy. It's mine, she said simply. He didn't ask again. Aaron Watts walked near the back of the lead group, helping with the younger children. He had taken on the role without being assigned it, simply moving to where he was needed, keeping the smaller children moving, quietly encouraging the ones who were slowing down, carrying a 4-year-old named Mia on his back when she got too tired to walk. He had slept for 5 hours after arriving at the ravine camp, and when he woke up he had reported to Dr. Okafor for medical assessment and then immediately asked where he could help. Marcus had noticed him. Hard not to. The kid moved like someone who had made a decision, a quiet, private decision about what kind of person he was going to be in the middle of all this. He never asked for recognition. He never complained. He just worked. During a rest break at the 2-hour mark, Marcus found himself sitting near Aaron. The boy was eating a ration bar methodically, looking north toward the mountains they couldn't see yet. You're doing good, Marcus said quietly. Aaron glanced at him. So are you. I've got one kid. You've got 11 of them. Aaron almost smiled. Almost. Mia's the only one who needed carrying. The others are tough.
You all are, Marcus said. He meant it.
Aaron was quiet for a moment. Then, do you think the Armada is coming? Marcus looked at the hazy sky. The alien ship was somewhere to the south. They couldn't see it, but they could occasionally see a faint orange glow on the horizon that might be it or might be the last of the colony fires. He wasn't sure. Yes, he said. I think they're coming. How long? I don't know. He paused. But I think we just have to be alive when they get here.
That's the whole job right now.
Just be alive. Aaron considered this. Then he nodded slowly, like someone accepting a set of terms that weren't great, but were the best available. Okay, he said. I can do that. At the 6-hour mark, they hit trouble. The second group, 20 survivors led by a militia member named Corporal Kim, sent back a whispered radio message. 6 members of their group were unable to continue. 2 with severe burns on their legs from the initial attack. 1 with a broken ankle sustained during the ravine travel. 3 who had simply hit the wall, the point beyond which the body refuses to move regardless of what the mind wants. Marcus stopped the lead group and waited while Harker worked it out. The solution was agonizing in its practicality. Improvised stretchers for the 2 with leg burns and the broken ankle, carried in rotation by 4 militia members each. The 3 who had hit the wall were given 15 minutes, food, water, and Dr. Okafor's quiet, relentless encouragement, which turned out to be more effective than any of the more dramatic options. After 15 minutes, all 3 stood up and kept moving. Dr. Okafor, Marcus thought, was remarkable. She had been on her feet continuously for 60 hours. She had treated burns, lacerations, fractures, dehydration, shock, and at least 2 cases of what she quietly diagnosed to Marcus as acute grief response presenting as physical symptoms, the body's way of turning unbearable emotion into something tangible. She did all of this without complaint, without hesitation, with a particular kind of calm that comes not from the absence of emotion but from the decision to use it as fuel rather than weight. He told her this during a rest stop or something like it, not that eloquently because he was not a man given to eloquent speeches, but something along those lines. She looked at him with tired eyes and said, I keep thinking about my husband. He was in District 1. Marcus didn't know what to say. He would have thought it was ridiculous, she continued, me carrying all this equipment all the way to the mountains in the dark. He always said I was impractical.
She paused.
He was right mostly. But right now, impractical is all I've got. She picked up her medical kit. Let's keep moving. Dawn came gray and hazy. The sun filtered through the particulate layer to a dull amber disk that gave light without much warmth. They were 22 kilometers from the glacial caves. Marcus stopped the lead group in a deep section of ravine where the walls were high enough to provide complete cover, and they rested for 2 hours while he climbed to a vantage point to check the sky. The alien ship was visible. It was to the south and east, maybe 40 kilometers away, moving slowly, its vast dark shape catching the amber light in a way that made it look almost beautiful, which was an obscene thing to think, and Marcus thought it anyway because his brain was not currently in the business of filtering what it processed. It was moving north.
Toward them.
He climbed back down and found Harker. We've got maybe 6 hours, he said. Maybe less. Harker looked at the group around him. People sleeping against ravine walls, children curled against adults, militia members keeping watch with hollow eyes. Can we make 22 kilometers in 6 hours? Not all of us, Marcus said honestly. Not the stretcher cases. Harker rubbed his face. Options. Marcus looked at the map. There's a secondary cave system here. Not the glacial caves, smaller, shallower, but it's here, about 8 kilometers north. It won't be as shielded. But it's better than open ground. Split. Stretcher cases, the youngest children and their immediate caregivers go to the secondary caves. Everyone else pushes to the glacier. Harker looked at him. You have to split the group. I know. In a split if the aliens find either group. I know, Marcus said again. But in a group if they find us, they find all of us. Harker stared at the map. Give me 10 minutes, he said. He gave himself 8. Then he called a meeting of the 20 group leaders, explained the situation in flat, clear terms with no softening, and put it to a vote. The vote was 18-2 in favor of the split. They reorganized in 20 minutes, faster than Marcus expected, because people moved with a purpose that only comes when the consequences of slowness are visible and enormous. The stretcher cases, 12 of the youngest children including Mia, and their caregivers were assigned to the secondary cave team. Dr. Okafor went with them because she was needed most where the injured were. Aaron Watts was assigned to the Glacier group because he was 14, healthy, and mobile. He accepted this without argument. But Marcus saw him look over his shoulder at Mia, the 4-year-old he had carried through the night, when the group separated, and the expression on his face was something that Marcus would carry with him for the rest of his life. Lily was with Marcus in the Glacier group. She had not spoken about the split. She had just taken Marcus's hand when the group separated, and she had looked at the secondary cave team, some of the children she had come to know in 3 days of survival, and then she had turned her face north toward the mountains and kept walking. 22 kilometers. 6 hours. A ship moving toward them from the south. Marcus Webb put his head down and walked. 260 light-years away, Admiral Elena Vasquez was strapped into the command chair of the TDF Relentless when the fleet dropped out of FTL. They came in at the system's edge, exactly as planned, 47 ships appearing from faster-than-light travel in a spread formation designed to minimize the chance that a single weapon system could hit more than one vessel simultaneously. The fleet's FTL signature was impossible to hide. The energy discharge of 47 ships dropping from FTL simultaneously was the astronomical equivalent of a shout in a quiet room. She wasn't trying to sneak in. She was trying to arrive in a formation that gave them the best possible combat options from the first second. The Relentless bridge was quiet. Not the quiet of inaction. Every station was alive with data streams, sensor readings, tactical displays, the controlled urgency of 2,000 crew members doing their jobs with the precision of people who had trained for this for years and were now, for the first time, doing it for real. All ships confirm FTL exit, her navigator reported. Formation intact. No casualties on transition. Good. Vasquez looked at the main display. Tactical. Give me the system. The holographic display populated in seconds. New Eden star. The planet New Eden itself, visible even at this range as a small disk that the sensors were already resolving into detail. And there, in high orbit above New Eden, exactly where the beacon data had placed it, the alien ship. Even at this range, the sensors gave them enough to understand that the data package they had received from the beacon had not exaggerated. The ship was enormous. Larger at this distance than it had any right to be. They know we're here, Commander Chen said. That FTL transition was not subtle. No, Vasquez agreed. It wasn't supposed to be. She had made a deliberate choice on that, a show of force rather than a covert approach. She wanted them to see 47 ships drop out of FTL. She wanted them to understand what they were dealing with before the first shot was fired. It was, she had explained to her senior officers, a professional courtesy. Are they moving? Negative. The alien vessel is stationary in high orbit, not moving to engage? Negative. Vasquez considered this for 3 seconds. A vessel that large, with the energy output they had observed in the attack data, could move to engage at any moment. The fact that it wasn't meant either that its crew hadn't seen the fleet yet, unlikely, given their apparent technological capability, or that they weren't concerned by the sight of 47 human ships. She found option 2 significantly more worrying than option 1. Begin approach, she said. Maintain formation. All weapon systems to ready state. Chen, I want a firing solution on that ship calculated and updated every 30 seconds. Admiral, Chen said. At this range, even our best railgun batteries would need approximately. I know the range, Commander. I said calculate the solution. I want it ready. Yes, Admiral. The fleet began moving toward New Eden. At 30 million kilometers distance, the alien ship finally responded. It didn't fire. It sent a signal. Not in any human language. Not in English or Mandarin or Spanish or any of the 12 official Terran colonial authority languages. What arrived on the relentless communications array was a structured sequence of electromagnetic pulses, mathematical in nature, repeating, building in complexity. It was clearly intentional. It was clearly communication. It was entirely incomprehensible. Vasquez's communications officer, Lieutenant James Park, a linguist by training who had spent 3 years studying the Varadi color pattern language and 2 years on the Shun probe decoding project, listened to the signal with his eyes closed and his face taut with concentration. After 4 minutes, he turned to Vasquez. "Admiral, it's mathematical. Base 12 counting system, which is interesting. Ours is base 10, Varadi is base 8. They're building a framework. It would take days to fully decode," but he hesitated. "But what, Lieutenant?" "The repeating component, the segment that comes back every 30 seconds, I think it's a territorial marker. A claim. Like they're saying this system is ours." Vasquez looked at the display. At the alien ship. At New Eden below it, the planet that had held 43,000 human beings 3 days ago. "Send them a response," she said. "What response, Admiral?" She thought for exactly 2 seconds. "The same signal. Send it back to them, identical. And then add our own territorial marker, standard Terran Colonial Authority claims signal for New Eden. Send it on repeat." Park blinked. "We're mirroring their signal back at them? We're telling them, in the clearest language available, that we're not impressed by their territorial claim, we have our own, and we're not leaving." She turned back to the display. "Send it." The signal went out. 3 minutes and 17 seconds later, the alien ship fired. The beam that came at the Relentless was the same type as the weapons used on New Eden's districts, a continuous directed energy stream, white-hot, nearly as wide as the Relentless herself. What happened next would be analyzed for decades by Terran Defense Force strategists and engineers. The Relentless moved. Not because Vasquez ordered it. The order to move came a fraction of a second after the shot was already being evaded, because Captain Rodriguez, commanding the Relentless, had given standing authorization to his helmsman to execute evasive maneuvers on confirmed incoming fire without waiting for an order. They had discussed this in the briefing. They had agreed that in a combat situation where reaction time might be measured in milliseconds, the chain of command had to be compressed. The helmsman, a young man named Ensign Torres, 24 years old, who had qualified as the fastest reaction time helm operator in the 3rd Fleet, fired lateral thrusters and pitched the Relentless 43 degrees in 1.7 seconds. The beam missed by 11 meters. 11 meters. A kilometer-long ship, a weapon that could erase a city, and the margin was 11 meters. On the bridge, nobody breathed for 1 full second after the beam passed. Then Vasquez said, with a voice that was completely steady, "All ships, evasive pattern Delta. Chin, return fire. All batteries. Now." 38 railgun batteries on the Relentless opened fire simultaneously. The sound, transmitted through the ship structure rather than through any external medium, was a deep, rhythmic, bone-deep drumming that you felt more than heard. The Terran Armada's 3rd Fleet opened the first battle between humanity and an unknown intelligent species. The alien ship's defenses were not what they expected. They expected energy shields, some kind of protective field, common in science fiction and theorized by Terran engineers, but not yet achieved by human technology. Instead, what the alien ship seemed to rely on was a combination of its enormous mass. Railgun rounds and missiles hit it and visibly damaged its outer hull, but the ship was so large that individual impacts that would have been catastrophic to any human vessel were merely surface wounds, and what Chen identified as a secondary defense system, a field of electromagnetic interference projected around the ship that made targeting extremely difficult and caused roughly 30% of incoming fire to veer off course. The alien ship, on the other hand, fired fast. Faster than the initial shot had suggested. The charging cycle between shots was approximately 45 seconds, and with multiple weapon emitters on the hull, it could fire in different directions almost simultaneously. The second shot hit the TDF Cavalier, a frigate on the left flank. The Cavalier didn't survive. A ship of 400 crew, gone in the same way that New Eden's districts had gone. Not an explosion exactly, but an erasure. A beam that hit and simply took everything in its path apart at the molecular level. Vasquez watched it happen on the display and said nothing and kept her eyes on the tactical picture. 46 ships, she said. Continue engagement. The battle lasted 4 hours and 17 minutes. In that time, the Terran Armada's third fleet lost 9 ships. The Cavalier first. Then the Pemberton, another frigate. Then the destroyer Wake Island. Then, in a terrible sequence over 20 minutes in the battle's second hour, 5 more ships. The Damascus, the Cordova, the Iron Cross, the Nelson's Pride, and the light cruiser Artemis, hit by the alien weapon in rapid succession as the alien ship shifted its fire pattern and began targeting the fleet's flanking elements. 2,411 Terran Defense Force personnel died in those 4 hours and 17 minutes. But the alien ship was not unharmed. 3 things saved the Terran Armada from complete destruction. The first was evasion. Ensign Torres on the Relentless had developed, through the first 90 minutes of combat, an intuitive understanding of the alien weapon's targeting behavior, slight tells in the electromagnetic interference field that preceded each shot by approximately 2 seconds. He began calling warnings, incoming bank left, incoming pitch down, and broadcasting them across the fleet communications net, and helmsman fleet-wide began adopting his evasion patterns. The weapon that had seemed unstoppable in the first 30 minutes of combat began, slowly, to find its targets slightly less reliably. The second was the Valkyrie fighters. 200 Valkyrie-class interceptors launched from the Relentless and the 2 other carriers in the fleet 20 minutes into the battle. They were too small to significantly damage a vessel the size of the alien ship individually. But Chun had identified something in the first minutes of combat. The alien ship's electromagnetic interference field, the one that was deflecting much of the fleet's incoming fire, had to be projected from emitters on the hull. Those emitters had to be visible. And Valkyries, flying attack patterns at close range that would have been suicidal for a capital ship, could get close enough to target individual emitters. They lost 41 Valkyries doing it. 41 pilots gone. But they destroyed 7 of the interference field emitters, which reduced the field's effectiveness by nearly 40%. The third thing was a captain named Rodriguez. The Relentless had been built around the accelerated mass driver, the kinetic weapon capable of launching a tungsten projectile at a significant fraction of light speed. It had never been used in combat before. It was theoretically capable of penetrating any known material, but known material had not included whatever the alien ship's hull was made of. Rodriguez, without being ordered to, had spent the first 3 hours of combat running a continuous passive sensor scan of the alien ship's hull, looking for inconsistencies, variations in density, structural weak points. What he found in the 3rd hour was not a weakness exactly, but it was a difference. The alien ship's hull was not uniformly constructed. There was a section near what appeared to be the ship's main weapon emitter, a circular area roughly half a kilometer in diameter, where the hull density readings were lower than the surrounding structure. He brought it to Vasquez. She looked at the data for 4 seconds. "How confident are you?" she asked. 70%, Rodriguez said. "What happens if you're wrong and the round doesn't penetrate?" "We've used one of our 2 AMD shots and accomplished nothing." "And if you're right? If the main weapon emitter is behind that section and we hit it," Rodriguez paused. "I think we hurt them very badly, Admiral." Vasquez looked at the tactical display. 9 ships lost. 2,400 dead. The alien ship still moving, still firing, still enormous and dark and terrifying above New Eden.
"Take the shot," she said.
The accelerated mass driver charged for 90 seconds. During those 90 seconds, the Relentless took 2 glancing hits from the alien weapon, not direct hits, the kind that had destroyed the Cavalier and the others, but grazing impacts that tore through the ship's outer hull in 2 places and killed 37 crew members in those sections and sent the damage control teams into a controlled, shouting sprint through smoke-filled corridors. Vasquez sat in her command chair and did not move. "Admiral," Chun said. "Hull breach on decks 7 through 9, port side. Emergency bulkheads are—" "I know." "Is the AMD charged?" 92%. When it hits 100, we fire." "Admiral, if we take another direct hit while the AMD is—" "I know, Commander." She turned to look at Chen. and whatever was in her face made Chen stop talking. When it hits 100, we fire. 95%. 97. 99. 100. Fire, Vasquez said. The Relentless shuddered from the recoil. Even with compensators, the accelerated mass driver produced a recoil that the crew felt in their bones, a single deep lurch that felt like the ship itself had taken a breath and held it. The tungsten projectile, 2 meters long, half a meter wide, traveling at 12% the speed of light, crossed the distance between the Relentless and the alien ship in 0.7 seconds. It hit the lower-density hull section Rodriguez had identified. It went through. The effect was not immediate. For 3 full seconds after the impact, nothing visible happened, and Vasquez felt her stomach drop with the certainty that Rodriguez had been wrong. The round hadn't penetrated, they had wasted the shot. Then the alien ship's main weapon emitter went dark. Not an explosion, not a dramatic detonation. It simply stopped. The emitter, which had been glowing with a blue-white light that was visible across the entire engagement distance, went out, like a switch had been thrown. 3 seconds after that, secondary explosions began rippling across the alien ship's hull. Internal, each one pushing outward through the hull plating, irregular, spreading from the impact point like cracks in ice. Not catastrophic, not immediately, but visible.
Real.
Their main weapon is offline, Chen said, and her voice had something in it that had not been there for 4 hours, something that was not quite disbelief, but was right next to it. Admiral, their main weapon is offline. The bridge did not erupt. The crew of the Relentless were professionals. What happened was quieter than celebration, a collective shift, a change in the quality of the silence, something released from the air. Vasquez looked at the display. All ships advance. Full acceleration. Maintain fire on identified hull weak points. Chen, second AMD target. Find me their propulsion system. Yes, Admiral. And Chen. Admiral? Tell the fighters to come home. They've earned it. Without its primary weapon, the alien ship was still not helpless. It had secondary weapon systems, smaller than the main emitter, still enormously powerful by any human standard, capable of cutting through hull plating without difficulty. It continued to fight. For the next hour and 40 minutes, it traded fire with 38 human ships at close range, and it was brutal and costly. 3 more human ships lost, 800 more dead, but the dynamic had changed. Before the AMD shot, the alien ship had been winning. Now it was fighting for its life. The turning point that everyone would later agree was decisive came 70 minutes after the AMD shot, when Commander Chen found the alien ship's propulsion system, a cluster of drive emitters on the ship's lower aft section, and the Relentless fired its second and final AMD round. The second round hit the propulsion cluster directly. The alien ship stopped moving. Not dead. Not destroyed, but immobile, trapped in high orbit above New Eden. Its secondary weapon still firing, still lethal, but unable to maneuver, unable to bring its firing arcs to bear with the precision it had managed before. The Terran Armada's Third Fleet circled it like wolves. They maintained the engagement for another 47 minutes, methodical, relentless, targeting every identified system on the alien hull with concentrated fire from multiple ships simultaneously. The alien ship's secondary weapons went offline one by one as the emitters were destroyed. Its hull integrity deteriorated steadily. At 14:17 ship time, the alien vessel attempted to execute what Chen identified as a self-destruct sequence, a power surge in the ship's core that would have, if completed, produced an explosion large enough to damage or destroy every ship in the immediate area. The Relentless and 3 destroyers hit the ship's power core with every available weapon simultaneously before the sequence could complete. The alien ship went silent. It did not explode dramatically. It simply stopped, all lights out, all emissions ceased, adrift in orbit above New Eden. A dead thing that had, hours ago, been the most terrifying object any human being had ever encountered. Vasquez looked at it for a long time. Then she said, "Status." "All hostile emissions have ceased," Chen said. Her voice was quiet. "The alien vessel appears to be disabled or destroyed." We are not detecting any further weapon activity. Survivors on our side? 38 ships operational. 9 ships lost. Casualties. Chen stopped. Started again. Casualties total confirmed at 3,214. 3,214. Vasquez looked at the dead alien ship. Looked at New Eden below it. Get me a medical team ready for planetary descent, she said. And get me communications with whatever's left on the surface. Marcus Webb reached the glacial caves with 603 survivors at 1645 on October 17th. The last 6 kilometers had been the worst, a steep climb through rock and ice with the alien ship visible on the horizon to the south, close enough now that you could see the shape of it without the satellite imagery, a dark mass against the orange hazy sky. People had moved with the silent, desperate focus of those who can see the thing chasing them. Nobody fell behind. Nobody stopped. The injured, who were mobile, kept moving. The ones who weren't had been dispersed between the secondary cave group and this group in ways that distributed the burden as evenly as possible. Lily had walked every step of it herself. Marcus had offered to carry her at the 4-kilometer mark when her steps were starting to drag, and her breathing was labored from the altitude and the cold. She had looked at him with her mother's dark eyes and said, "I'm fine," in a voice that was exhausted but absolute, and he had not offered again. The glacial caves were exactly as he remembered from a hunting trip 6 years ago, massive, deep, carved by glacial movement over thousands of years into the rock of the mountain face. The entrance was narrow, barely wide enough for 2 people side by side, which was itself a defensive advantage. Inside, the caves opened into a series of large chambers connected by passable tunnels. It was cold, several degrees below zero, and it was dark, and it smelled of stone and ice and deep geological time. It was also shielded. You couldn't see the sky from inside. You couldn't feel the ground shake. Whatever was happening outside, in here, you were insulated from it. Marcus stood at the entrance of the main chamber and watched his 603 survivors file in, and he felt something ease in his chest that had been locked tight for 3 days. Not relief exactly. The secondary cave group was still out there, still exposed, and the alien ship was still moving, but something close to it. The particular feeling of having done the thing you said you would do. He found a corner and sat down. Lily sat beside him and put her head on his shoulder. He put his arm around her. "Good job," he said quietly. "You too," she said. Within minutes, she was asleep. He sat awake and kept watch. Harker found him 2 hours later, going through the communication setup, trying to get the short-range radio system working inside the caves. The rock walls created interference, but they had found a configuration that let them maintain contact with the secondary cave group, 8 kilometers south. "How are they?" Marcus asked. "Stable," Harker said. "Dr. Okafor has 2 of the burn cases in bad shape, but the cave is holding." "The ship?" Harker looked at him. "It was moving toward us. Then it stopped moving." "Stopped." "About 2 hours ago. The satellite system we've been piggybacking is only giving us partial data, but," Harker paused, "it's in the same position it was 2 hours ago. And I'm picking up something on the long-range radio." Marcus looked up. "What kind of something?" "Human signals. Encrypted. Terran Defense Force encryption protocols. Faint, but I've got the receiver optimized." Harker sat down across from him. His face in the cave's dim light was carefully neutral, but there was something moving behind his eyes that Marcus had not seen there before. "Marcus, I think the Armada is here." The silence stretched. "Are you sure?" Marcus asked.
"No."
"But the signal structure matches TDF standard fleet communications, and I've been monitoring long-range sensors for 3 days, and I've never picked anything up like this before." Harker looked at the cave wall, at the rock and ice above them. "There's something happening out there. Something big." Marcus thought about the signal they had sent, the beacon, 4 days ago. 4 days ago, he had been sitting in a ravine arguing about whether to activate it, whether it was worth the risk, whether the Armada would come. He had voted yes. He looked at Lily, asleep against the cave wall, her wooden box of rocks still held against her chest. Small and brave, and impossibly dear. "If they're here," he said quietly. "If the Armada is actually here."
Don't, Harker said. Not yet.
Don't let yourself go there until we know for certain. Marcus nodded. He understood. Hope was dangerous in situations like this. The fall from hope to nothing was further than the fall from grim endurance. But he thought about it anyway. He couldn't help it. He thought about the Armada out there, above them, doing whatever it was doing, while they sat in the dark and waited. The confirmation came at 21:30. Not through the radio, through the satellite system, which suddenly came fully alive after hours of partial data, feeding them a complete picture of the space above New Eden. Marcus and Harker crowded around the small screen of the satellite terminal together. The alien ship was in orbit.
Dark.
No emissions. Around it, spread across a wide arc of space, were 38 human vessels. Harker stared at the screen for a very long time. Then he sat down on the cave floor. This retired colonel, this man who had been iron and steady and unbreakable for 4 days, and he put his head in his hands and his shoulders shook once, and then he was still. Marcus put his hand on the man's back and said nothing. After a moment, Harker raised his head. His eyes were red, but his face was composed. They came, he said. They came, Marcus said. In the corner of the cave, Lily slept on, holding her box of rocks, in the dark and the cold, safe. The Terran Armada's Third Fleet began atmospheric descent operations on New Eden at 6 o'clock on October 18th. The first ships to land were the medical shuttles, 6 of them, each carrying full trauma teams, medical equipment, supplies. They were guided to the glacial caves by the short-range radio signal that Harker had been broadcasting on approved TDF emergency frequencies since the satellite confirmation the night before. Marcus was at the cave entrance when the first shuttle came in. It came down through the hazy orange sky in a long, controlled descent, a gray and white vessel with the blue Terran Colonial Authority cross on its side and TDF markings on the tail section. It landed on the flat ice shelf 200 meters from the cave entrance, and the boarding ramp came down, and a woman in a TDF medical uniform came down the ramp with a medical kit in each hand, walking fast, her boots crunching on the ice. Behind her came 12 more people. Then 12 more. Then the second shuttle landed on the ice shelf, and its ramp came down. Marcus stood and watched this happen. He was aware that he was crying. Not dramatically. He was not a demonstrative man, but there were tears on his face, and the cold air of the mountain made them sting, and he didn't bother to wipe them away because it seemed like an enormous waste of energy to pretend he wasn't feeling exactly what he was feeling. The lead medical officer reached him. "Are you the group leader?" she asked.
"One of them," he said.
"Colonel Harker is inside. I'm Marcus Webb. He stopped, because what he was going to say was I'm just a farmer, which was accurate but felt, in this moment, completely beside the point. What he said instead was, I've got 840 survivors. 603 in here, the rest in a secondary cave system 8 kilometers south. The medical officer nodded, pulling out a data tablet. How many critical? Dr. Okafor has the medical details. She's with the secondary group, with the critical cases. We'll get to them immediately. She looked past him into the cave entrance. Is there anyone in immediate danger of... A woman, Marcus said. 70 years old. She's been keeping herself going by will alone for 4 days. I think she's been hiding how bad the chest pains are. He had noticed. He had mentioned it to Dr. Okafor, who had done what she could. We'll find her first. The medical officer put a hand briefly on his arm, not a clinical touch but a human one, a 5-second acknowledgement. You got them here. Well done. Marcus nodded. He couldn't speak for a moment. There's a boy, he said when he could. Aaron Watts. 14 years old. He kept 11 children alive for 2 days on his own before we found them. He stopped. Felt absurd. The medical officer was here for medical emergencies, not character references. But she was writing on her tablet. Name, she asked. Aaron Watts. She wrote it down. I've got it, she said. Lily woke up to the sound of the shuttles and came to the cave entrance and stood next to Marcus and looked at the medical teams moving across the ice and at the shuttles sitting on the shelf and at the sky where, if you looked carefully through the haze, you could see the shapes of TDF vessels in orbit. She looked at all of this for a long time. Then she said, They came, Marcus said. She reached up and took his hand. They stood there together on the mountain in the cold and watched the Terran Armada's people move toward them across the ice, and Marcus Webb, who was not a demonstrative man, held his daughter's hand and breathed the cold air of New Eden and was grateful with a completeness and a depth that he had no words for, that he would spend years trying to find words for and never quite manage, because some gratitude is simply too large for language. Inside the caves, the medical teams worked quickly and professionally. The old woman Marcus had noticed, a 73-year-old named Eleanor Park, who had walked 60 kilometers and climbed a mountain on a heart that was genuinely struggling, was stabilized by a cardiac team in 20 minutes and transported to the medical shuttle. She would survive. She would later say that she had been absolutely determined to survive because she wanted to see what happened next, which was, the medical team agreed, an excellent medical attitude. Aaron Watts was found sitting against the cave wall helping 3 younger children eat their first proper meal, hot food, brought in by the medical teams, the first hot food anyone had eaten in 4 days. He was eating too mechanically, the way you eat when your body knows it needs fuel and your mind is somewhere else. A young TDF medic crouched down next to him and checked him over. Physically healthy, slightly dehydrated, obvious emotional exhaustion, and then stayed crouching and looked at him. "Are you Aaron Watts?" the medic asked. Aaron looked at him. "Yeah. Someone told us to find you specifically." Aaron frowned. "Who?" The medic smiled slightly. "A farmer named Marcus Webb said to look after you." Aaron was quiet for a moment. He looked at the children he had been helping. Mia was sitting across from him with a nutrition bar, taking it apart with careful small fingers and inspecting each piece before eating it. "I just did what needed doing," he said. The medic looked at him steadily. "Yeah," he said. "That's usually how it goes." The second group of survivors, the 237 in the secondary cave system 8 kilometers south, including all the critical medical cases, were reached by the TDF medical teams at 9:30. Dr. Sarah Okafor was standing outside the secondary cave entrance when the shuttles arrived. She had been standing there for 2 hours waiting because she had heard the radio confirmation that the Armada had landed, and she had wanted to be ready to brief the medical team the moment they arrived. She had her notes in hand, detailed, organized, every patient's status recorded in the careful handwriting of someone who had kept meticulous notes under circumstances where meticulous notes should have been impossible. The TDF lead physician, a man named Dr. Carter, came off the shuttle, and she was already moving toward him with her hand out and her briefing on her lips. 12 critical patients. 2 severe thermal burns, lower extremities. Both have infection that I've been managing with limited antibiotic supplies. 1 cardiac patient, 73. She's been evacuated, Dr. Carter said. Eleanor Park. Already on a shuttle. Okafor stopped. Let out a breath. Good. The others. Show me, he said. She showed him. She walked him through every patient, every case, every decision she had made with the limited resources she had, every worry she had carried that she had not let show. Dr. Carter listened and asked precise questions and took notes and said, at the end of the walkthrough, with a directness that she appreciated, "These people are alive because of you. Whatever happened here, that part is yours." Sarah Okafor stood in the entrance of a cave that smelled of stone and ice and 4 days of human survival, and she looked at the sky, the hazy, orange, smoke-filtered sky of a planet that had been systematically destroyed, and she thought about her husband in District 1, and then she folded that thought away in the place where she kept the things she was not ready to look at yet, and she said, "Tell me what you need me to do." Admiral Elena Vesquez descended to New Eden's surface on October 19th. She came in a command shuttle with a small security detail. Protocol demanded the security detail, but she had reduced it to 4 people over the objections of her aide, because she was not going to arrive at a survivor camp with a militarized security presence, and she was not going to be told otherwise. She had also brought, in the shuttle's cargo hold, every medical supply, food package, and emergency equipment unit that could be spared from the fleet. The shuttle landed on the ice shelf near the glacial caves. She came down the ramp alone. The security detail stayed at the top of the ramp on her orders and walked across the ice to the survivor camp that had spread out from the cave entrance. Tents and makeshift shelters had been set up by the TDF teams over the previous day, and supplies were flowing, and the area had the organized, purposeful look of an emergency relief operation working at full efficiency. 840 people were alive here. The numbers from the rest of New Eden's northern wilderness. Other survivor groups who had been located by TDF search teams over the past 24 hours brought the total to 1,219. Not 43,000. Not the colony as it had been. But 1,219 people who had been on New Eden when the alien ship arrived and who were still breathing. Vasquez walked through the camp. She met Colonel Harker first. He had been identified by the TDF teams as the de facto military authority among the survivors, and he met her with a salute that was automatic and slightly ragged at the edges, because the man was clearly running on empty. "Colonel," she said, returning the salute. "You did well." "My people did well," he said. "I just kept them pointed in the right direction." "That's generally what command is," she said. She looked at him steadily. "I read your record when we identified you from the beacon data. You were good before you retired. You're clearly still good." He said nothing for a moment. Then, "My daughter was in District 3, Admiral." "I know." She held his gaze. "I'm sorry. My brother was in District 2. They looked at each other, two people who had been shaped by loss into the people currently standing on this ice shelf, and who understood, without any further discussion, exactly what the other had been carrying. "The ship?" Harker asked. "Disabled. Likely destroyed. Our engineers are trying to get aboard for intelligence collection, but the hull integrity is uncertain and we're proceeding carefully." She paused. "We don't know who they are yet. We don't know where they came from. We don't know if there are more." "Then you're staying." "I have 20 vessels establishing a defensive perimeter around this system right now," she said. "I am absolutely staying." She found Marcus Webb sitting on a rock near the edge of the ice shelf, looking out at the valley below. The camp was alive with activity behind him, but this spot was quiet, slightly apart from everything. His daughter was sitting beside him, leaning against his arm, looking at something in a wooden box on her lap. Vasquez walked over and stood at the edge of the shelf, looking at the same view. The valley, the silver grass plains in the distance, the haze of smoke on the horizon that was the last remnant of New Eden's colony zones. "Marcus Webb?" she asked. He looked up. He didn't know who she was. She was wearing a cold-weather jacket over her uniform, and the rank insignia wasn't visible.
He started to stand. "Please don't," she said.
"I'm Elena Vasquez. I command the Third Fleet." He settled back onto the rock and looked at her. His face was the face of a man who had been through something enormous and was still very slowly processing exactly how enormous it had been. His eyes were calm, but very tired. "You're the Admiral," he said. "Yes." He nodded. "My brother was in District 2, she said. She didn't usually lead with that, it wasn't professional. But she was saying it now because something in his face told her that he would understand why she was saying it, and because there were moments when professionalism was less useful than honesty. He looked at her. "I'm sorry," he said. "Me too." She looked at his daughter. "This must be Lily." Lily looked up from her box with her mother's dark eyes. "Yes," she said. "Are you the one who fought the ship?" "My fleet did." "Yes." Lily considered this. "Thank you," she said. Simply, directly, with no decoration. Vasquez looked at this 9-year-old girl who had walked 60 kilometers through wilderness in the dark, holding a box of rocks. "You're welcome," she said, with the same simplicity. She sat down on the rock beside them, which was not an Admiral thing to do and which she did anyway, and for a little while the three of them sat on the ice shelf at the edge of the glacial mountains and looked out at New Eden, at what was left of it, and at what had endured, and at the sky above them that was, slowly, very slowly, beginning to clear. Part 11. What the Stars Remember. The intelligence team spent 11 days trying to access the alien vessel. It was dangerous work. The ship's hull had been compromised in dozens of places, and the internal structure was alien in ways that made navigation treacherous. 3 TDF engineers were injured during the first attempt. After that, Vasquez ordered a methodical approach. Exterior mapping first, then controlled access at identified safe points. No solo entry under any circumstances. What they found inside the ship was enormous in every sense. The vessel was crewed by approximately 600 beings. They found the remains because the alien crew had not survived the battle. The aliens were bipedal, roughly humanoid in general body structure, but significantly different in detail. Larger, approximately 2.5 meters tall on average, with 4 arms, no visible facial features that corresponded to human eyes or nose, and a skin covering that appeared to be partially metallic. Lieutenant Park spent 3 days documenting everything he could access. They found data systems vast, complex, encrypted. Breaking the encryption would take years, possibly decades, and Vasquez sent everything to Terran intelligence immediately. But some things did not require decryption because they were in the data equivalent of a filing system, organized by category rather than content. One category was clear even without translation. Star maps.
Hundreds of them.
Systems charted, organized, annotated. And on those maps, a symbol, repeating, consistent, that Park identified as a territorial marker. The same marker that had been in the signal sent toward the Terran fleet. The same one that had been in the signal Vasquez had mirrored back at them. New Eden system was on the maps, marked with a territorial symbol. But the symbol was new, not historically embedded in the map, but recently added. Based on the map's update structure, it had been marked within the last 3 months, which meant this species had discovered New Eden's system recently, which meant they had arrived, seen a colony of humans on what they considered their territory, and had simply eliminated it. No warning, no communication attempt, no consideration, just elimination. Park brought this analysis to Vasquez. She sat with it for a long time. How many systems have their territorial symbol on these maps? She asked finally.
Park hesitated.
Lieutenant. 317, he said. 317 star systems claimed by this species as their territory. The Terran Exploration Authority had charted approximately 400 human-accessible systems. The overlap was not small. Vasquez stood at the window of her command shuttle, which she had been using as a ground command post while the fleet maintained orbit, and looked at New Eden's hazy sky and thought about what this meant. Not just New Eden. Not just the 43,000 dead. What this meant for humanity. For the next 10 years. For the next 100. She had come here to fight one ship. She was beginning to understand that she had started something considerably larger. On the 18th day, she called Marcus Webb to the command post. He came alone. Lily was in the survivor camp, which by this point had been substantially upgraded by TDF support teams into something more resembling a proper settlement. Food, shelter, warmth, medical care. The basic structure of survival had been replaced with something approaching stability. He sat across the table from her, this farmer who had walked 800 people through 60 kilometers of wilderness in the dark, and then calmly told the Terran Armada's Third Fleet where to find them. She had read everything there was to read about him. Engineer by training. Farmer by choice. Widower, not technically but functionally since the divorce. Father. He looked more rested than he had on the ice shelf. But there was something in his face that hadn't been there in his colony files, in the pre-attack records, a weight, permanent and settled. The weight of someone who has looked at something enormous and survived looking at it, but cannot quite unsee it. I need to ask you something, she said. Okay. The Colonial Authority is going to want to rebuild New Eden. It will take time, years probably. The infrastructure has to be rebuilt from the ground up. In the interim, survivors are being offered relocation to other colonies or back to Earth. She paused. What are you going to do? He looked at the table for a moment. Stay, he said. New Eden has nothing left. New Eden has the fields, he said. The fires burned the colony zones. The Northern Territory is intact. The soil is still good. He looked up at her. This planet didn't do anything wrong. The people who built it didn't do anything wrong. I'm not going to leave because something wrong was done to us here. She looked at him. Besides, he said, Lily's rocks are all from New Eden. She's not going to want to start a new collection. Vasquez was quiet for a moment. Then she said, the Terran Colonial Authority is going to need people who know this planet, who know the Northern Territory, who can help rebuild what was lost. I know, he said. The Defense Force is going to need to establish a permanent military presence in this system. We're not leaving New Eden unprotected again. Good, he said flatly. There may be more of them. We don't know yet. She met his eyes. Whatever is coming, it's going to be longer than one battle. I know that too, he said. But they came once. The Armada came. He paused. That means something. She held his gaze. What does it mean? It means we're not alone, he said. Even out here. Even in the far colonies. We're not alone. He thought for a moment. 43,000 people died, because nobody was protecting them. We're going to have to make sure that doesn't happen again. Not here, not anywhere. He said it without anger. Not without grief, but without anger, as though it was simply a problem that needed solving, a field that needed planting. That's how you make it mean something. Vasquez looked at him across the table, this farmer who is not an admiral, who is not a strategist, who had never commanded anything more complex than a grain harvest, and thought that he had said, in about 40 words, what she had been working toward in her mind for 18 days. Yes, she said.
Exactly that.
The survivor community began rebuilding on October 28th, 15 days after the attack. Not the colony as it had been. Too few people, too many losses, too much ground to cover. But a beginning, a camp that was organized, planned, sustainable, oriented toward permanence rather than emergency. The TDF engineering teams helped. The surviving colonists helped. People who had been teachers and farmers and doctors were also, it turned out, capable of laying foundations and running electrical cables and building walls, because when you are starting over from nothing, what you were before matters much less than what you decide to do now. Marcus ran the agricultural assessment, a formal survey of what Northern Territory farmland was still viable, what could be planted in the current growing season, what would need to wait. The answer was better than he feared. New Eden's northern fields were largely intact. The particulate layer in the atmosphere was already beginning to thin. Given a growing season, they could produce food. Given 2 growing seasons, they could be largely self-sufficient again. He filed the assessment with Harker and Grace Teller, who had emerged as the de facto civilian leaders of the survivor community. Harker was already in discussions with the TDF about the permanent military installation, a base in the Northern Territory, within communication range of the survivor settlement, with orbital defense capabilities that New Eden had never had before. Grace Teller was rebuilding the school. She had, within the first week, organized classes for every child in the survivor community using whatever space and materials were available. She said that education was the first thing you rebuilt, not the last, because it was the thing that told children that the future was real and that they were going to be in it. Aaron Watts had become her unofficial assistant teacher. He taught the younger children, the ones he had protected ING the attack, and others who had come to trust him in the weeks since. He was 16 now. No, wait, he was still 14. No. He was the same age he had been when this started, which was 14, and which somehow seemed insufficient to describe what he had become in the past month. He taught the children.
He was patient with them.
He helped them understand things that were too large to understand all at once by breaking them into smaller pieces, the way you understand anything too large, one part at a time. Mia, the 4-year-old he had carried through the night, had taken to sitting next to him whenever he was not teaching, close enough to touch his arm. She didn't say much.
She didn't need to.
Aaron seemed to understand that and didn't push her to be anything other than what she was. On November 3rd, 20 days after the attack, Marcus and Lily went back to the site of their house. It was gone. Of course it was gone. It had been in District 6, which had been the 4th district hit. There was nothing there but the glass-smooth fused surface that the alien beam left behind, stretching in all directions where their neighborhood had been. Their house, the porch, the wood stove that Lily had named Gerald, the wall of drawings. All of it gone. Lily stood on the edge of the fused surface and held her wooden box and looked at where their house had been. She did not cry. She had the particular stillness of a child processing something adult-sized. "Gerald is gone," she said. "Yeah," Marcus said. "The drawings are gone." "Yeah." She was quiet for a moment. "The rocks aren't gone," she said. "I still have the rocks." Marcus looked at her. "We can build a new house," she said. "We can get a new stove. You can name it Gerald, too." She looked up at him, those dark, serious eyes. "And I can make new drawings. It'll just take time." He crouched down next to her and looked at her face, this 9-year-old who had been through the end of everything and was already, in her methodical, careful way, planning what came next. He thought about what she had said.
It'll just take time.
He put his hand on her shoulder.
Yeah, he said.
It will. That's okay, she said. We've got time. She opened her wooden box and carefully took out one rock, a flat, dark piece of granite with a silver vein running through it, labeled in her careful handwriting. He looked at the label. It said, "The place where Dad cried when everything was gone, and then we started again." He stared at the label. "When did you write that?" he asked. His voice was not entirely steady.
Last night, she said.
I knew we were coming here today. I wanted to be ready. He held it together for about 4 seconds. Then he sat down on the fused glass ground of what used to be their neighborhood and held his daughter, and he let himself cry, properly, fully, the way he had not let himself cry in 20 days because there had always been something more urgent than grief. He cried for the 43,000. He cried for Thomas Vasquez in District 2, who he didn't know but felt he did now. He cried for Dr. Okafor's husband. He cried for Harker's daughter Rachel. He cried for Gerald the wood stove and the wall of drawings and the porch where they ate breakfast and the field of silver grass under twin moons where a 9-year-old had collected rocks for years. He cried because the loss was real, and it needed to be real before you could build on top of it. Lily held him the same way he had held her in the basement when the ground first shook, steady, patient, absolutely present. When he was done, she said, "Ab SYMJHY, from now on, I'm going to collect one rock from everywhere we go. So we always remember." "Ab SYMJHY," he said back to her, barely above a whisper. "From now on, together." She put the granite rock back in the box, closed the lid, and stood up. "Okay," she said. "Let's go home." 6 months after the attack on New Eden, the Terran Defense Force completed its strategic review of what was being formally designated First Contact Incident Alpha. The review ran to 4,000 pages. Admiral Elena Vasquez wrote the executive summary herself. The most important section was 2 paragraphs long. The species that attacked New Eden has not been definitively identified. Their territorial mapping suggests a civilization of significant age and extent, operating across a region of space that overlaps substantially with current and projected human expansion zones. The motivation for the attack appears territorial rather than predatory. New Eden was targeted as an unwanted presence in claimed space, not as a resource or target of opportunity. This distinction is significant. It means we are not dealing with an enemy who wishes to destroy humanity. We are dealing with an enemy who does not know, or does not care, that humanity has the same claim to the stars that they do. The next phase of this conflict will not be about survival. It will be about communication, boundaries, and the fundamental question of whether 2 species can share a galaxy or whether the stars are large enough only for one of us. She submitted the review to the Terran Council and then went back to work. The Third Fleet had been reorganized, rebuilt, in places, around the losses sustained at New Eden. 9 ships gone. 3,214 dead. The Cavalier and the 8 others had been given memorial designations. Their names would be carried by future ships, as was TDF tradition, because the tradition held that a ship's name does not die with its hull. New vessels were already under construction at the Meridian Station shipyards. Larger, faster, better armed, built around the lessons of the New Eden engagement. The AMD weapon systems were being replicated across the fleet, 4 per capital ship instead of 2, with improved targeting systems incorporating the hull density analysis that Rodriguez had used to find the alien ship's weak point. Rodriguez was promoted to Rear Admiral. He accepted the promotion and immediately went back to his desk, which was, Vasquez thought, exactly the right response. On New Eden, the settlement was growing. By the 6-month mark, the population had risen from 1,219 to just over 3,000. The original survivors plus the new arrivals who had chosen to come, drawn by a combination of colonial idealism, frontier spirit, and the particular human tendency to move toward exactly the things that everyone else is moving away from. The TDF base in the Northern Territory was operational. It had an orbital defense network, not yet as robust as Vasquez wanted, but real, functioning, permanent. Any unidentified vessel entering New Eden system would be detected, hailed, and responded to with force if necessary. New Eden was not undefended anymore. It would never be undefended again. Colonel Harker was the base's first commanding officer. He had reaccepted a TDF commission at Vasquez's invitation, which he had initially declined because he said he was too old, and she had said he was 52, and she had seen what he had done with civilian survivors on no sleep, no resources, and the grief of losing his daughter, and she would take 52 and James Harker over 32 and nearly anyone else she could name. He had thought about it for one day, and then accepted. He commanded the base with the same quality he had shown in the ravine, precise, direct, present, never wasting words on things that didn't need words. He was also, in the evenings, working on something. He had not told anyone what it was yet. It was private. It had to do with Rachel. Grace Teller opened New Eden's first post-attack school in month 4. It was a real building, small for rooms, walls that didn't leak, actual desks. She had designed it herself, argued the supply requisition through the colonial authority with a kind of tenacious, cheerful persistence that made bureaucracies eventually give up and say yes, and supervised the construction personally. On the first day of classes, 47 children came through the door. Aaron Watts was there. Not as a student. He was on a TDF educational scholarship that would take him to the academy in 2 years when he turned 16, but as a volunteer assistant. He was there because Grace Teller had asked him, and because he wanted to be there. He set up the room in the morning before the children arrived, arranged the desks, put up the things that Grace wanted on the walls. One wall had a map of New Eden, not just the colony zones, but the whole planet. The wilderness, the mountains, the glaciers, the rivers. The Northern Territory where 800 people had walked 60 kilometers in the dark. Another wall had drawings. The children who had survived had been asked to draw something, and their drawings were there, some of them simple, some of them raw with the particular directness of children who have experienced things that adults often struggle to put on paper. There were drawings of the alien ship, which children drew as a dark shape in an orange sky. There were drawings of the caves, dark and cold and safe. There were drawings of families, some of them complete, many of them not, some of them just one person alone in the drawing, which was its own kind of honesty. Mia, the 4-year-old, drew a picture of a boy walking through grass in the dark, carrying her. She had written her name at the bottom in careful, uneven letters. MIA. Underneath the drawing, she had written something with help from Aaron, who had spelled it out letter by letter because she had asked him to. It said, "The boy who carried me." Aaron saw it on the wall on the first day and stood in front of it for a long moment. Then he went to set up the desks. Marcus Webb planted his first post-attack crop on April 9th, 6 months after the attack. It was a smaller field than before. He didn't have the equipment yet to manage the full northern area that he had farmed pre-attack, and some of the northern fields would take another season to fully rehabilitate after the atmospheric disruption. But the field he had was good. The soil was dark and rich and ready, and the seeds he put into it were the same variety he had been growing for 18 years because he had kept the seed stock in the supply cache, and the supply cache had survived. He worked the field alone in the morning, the way he always had. Before sunrise. Bad coffee. The smell of New Eden soil, different from Earth soil, richer, with that indefinable quality that had made him decide, 18 years ago, that this was where he was going to build his life. Lily came out at sunrise with 2 cups of coffee and sat on the edge of the field and watched him work. The sky was clear. The particulate layer had mostly cleared over the past month. The planet's atmosphere was resilient, recovering faster than the models had predicted. The sky was blue again, not the dull orange haze of the post-attack weeks. True blue, deep and open. The twin moons were down. The morning star, the bright one, near New Eden's sun, was visible on the horizon. Lily sipped her coffee and looked at the sky.
"Dad," she said. "Yeah."
"Do you think they'll come back?" "The aliens." Marcus kept working. He turned the thought over. He had been turning it over for 6 months, the way you turn a hard truth over and over until you know it from every angle. "Maybe," he said. "And if they do?" "The Armada will be here," he said. "And Harker's base. And the Orbital Defense Network." He paused. "We're not the same colony we were in October. We're not going to be caught unprepared again." Lily was quiet for a moment. "But you think they might," she said. I think the galaxy is very large, he said, and we've just found out we're not the only ones in it who think they know where the borders are.
So yeah,
I think there might be more. He stopped working for a moment and looked at his daughter, sitting on the edge of his field with her coffee, in the blue morning light of New Eden. Does that scare you? She thought about it seriously, the way she thought about everything.
Yes, she said.
But the Armada came last time. And the time before that, we weren't ready. Now we are. She sipped her coffee. It's like the rocks. You can't unfind a rock once you've found it. You know it's there. You put it in the box. She looked at the sky. We found out the galaxy has things in it that want to hurt us.
We know that now.
We put it in the box. We don't unknow it. She paused. So now we're ready. Marcus looked at her. 9 years old. Going on something much older than 9. He went back to planting. 3 months after that, at the 9-month mark, something happened that nobody expected. A second alien ship appeared in New Eden system. Not like the first one, not a drop directly above the planet. It came in at the system's edge, slowly, with its drives visible on the detection network and its trajectory clearly non-aggressive, a wide, passive arc that kept it far from the planet. Harker had the base on full alert within 40 seconds. Vasquez, who had kept the Relentless in orbit above New Eden for the full 9 months rather than returning to Meridian Station, had the fleet at battle stations in 90 seconds. The alien ship did not fire. It sent a signal. Not the territorial claims signal. Something different, a different structure, a different rhythm. Park, who had spent the 9 months working intensively on the alien language recovered from the derelict ship, listened to it with the same focused intensity he had brought to every signal he had studied. It took him 4 hours. Then he came to Vasquez with shaking hands and a data tablet. "Admiral," he said, I'm not certain. I want to be very clear that I'm not certain, but I think it's a question." She looked at the tablet. "What kind of question?" "A negotiation opening." He swallowed. "I think they're asking if we want to talk." Vasquez looked at the data. At the signal structure. At the alien ship sitting at the system's edge. Not advancing, waiting. She thought about New Eden. About 43,000 dead. About 3,214 of her people. About her brother Thomas in District 2. She thought about what it would mean to say no. She thought about what it would mean to say yes. She thought about what Marcus Webb had said, sitting at the command post table. Whatever is coming, it's going to be longer than one battle. And then, that's how you make it mean something. She looked at Park. "Draft a response," she said. "Tell them yes." The message that went out from New Eden to the alien ship at the system's edge was brief. It used the mathematical framework that Park had been building for 9 months, imperfect, partial, hedged with uncertainty, but real. It said, as clearly as it could be said in a language that 2 species had been building from scratch for less than a year. "We are here. We lost 43,000 of our people. We're still here. We're willing to talk. But understand this. We will not be moved. We are not going away. These worlds are ours, and we defend what is ours. If you want to share the stars, we will talk about how. If you want to fight for them, we fought before, and we will fight again. We are waiting for your answer." The signal went out. The alien ship at the system's edge was still for 11 hours. Then it sent a response. Park decoded it in 6 hours, working without sleep, with 2 other linguists, looking over his shoulder. He came to Vasquez looking like a man who had been handed something he wasn't sure he was equipped to hold. "They acknowledge our losses," he said. His voice was very careful. "They acknowledge." He looked at the tablet. "I think the closest translation is, they acknowledge that we were here first. In this system. That we had a colony. That we had, I'm translating very loosely here, that we had roots." Vasquez waited. "They're not apologizing," he said. "I don't think their language structure has a direct equivalent of apology. But they're acknowledging." And there he stopped. Took a breath. "Admiral, I think they're asking how much space we need." The bridge was completely silent. Vasquez looked at the display. At New Eden. At the alien ship sitting patiently at the system's edge. She looked at the holographic map of the Kepler expanse, the human colonies, the transit lanes, the explored and unexplored territories. She thought about how long this was going to take. Years.
Decades, maybe.
A negotiation between two species who had started their relationship with an act of absolute violence and were now, 9 months later, trying to figure out if they could find another way. She thought about the 43,000. She thought about what they deserved. She thought that what they deserved was not to have died for nothing. What they deserved was for their deaths to have meant something, for humanity to have learned something from the loss, for the universe to have changed in some way because of what happened to them, for there to be a future that was different from the past. She began to compose her response. On New Eden, the morning star was bright above the northern fields. Marcus was in the 4th row when Lily came running across the field toward him. Running, not walking, which was unusual, which made him straighten up immediately with his pulse jumping. But she was smiling. She was actually smiling. She reached him out of breath and held up her communicator, a TDF issue unit that Harker had given her months ago because he thought a 9-year-old who had survived what she had survived deserved to have a working communicator. "They're talking," she said. "Dad, they're actually talking." Marcus looked at the communicator. At the news broadcast, TDF official channel, Vasquez's face on the screen, a statement she had made an hour ago that was being replayed on loop. He read the headline. Admiral Vasquez opens formal negotiations with unidentified species. 9-month standoff enters new phase. He stood in his field, his good field, the one he had planted 6 months ago, now green and full and growing, and read it. He stood there for a long time. Lily waited. She was good at waiting. "Caro," he said finally. "Let's make it count."
What?
"Nothing." He shook his head. He looked at his daughter, at her dark eyes, her serious face, her communicator with its news broadcast, the wooden box she always carried now on a strap over her shoulder. "It just means all of this. New Eden. The people who didn't make it. The people who did." He gestured at the field, at the camp visible in the distance, at the sky. "Let's make it count." Lily looked at him with those eyes that missed nothing. "We already are," she said simply. She was right. He turned back to the field. Above them, the sky was blue and clear and open, the way it had been before everything changed, the way it always would be on a planet called New Eden, which had been named for what it was, and which had, in its darkest season, proved that the name still fit. Stars above. Soil below. The living between them, tending what they had and building what they needed and refusing, with every planting season, every class in every school, every signal sent into the dark between stars, to be anything less than exactly what they were. Humanity. Stubborn. Grieving. Furious. Tender. Here. Still here. And Caro, from this moment forward, never again alone.
The end.